The scene opens in a dark alley of ancient Athens. A faded wooden sign sways in the wind, its carved letters almost worn away. Inside, dim oil lamps cast flickering light on stained walls, and the heavy stench of cheap wine hangs in the air. Here, a night with a woman costs no more than 2 barley flatbreads, sometimes even less than a jug of poor quality wine. These women were called Porny, the lowest rank in prostitution. The name was no title of honor, but a mark that reduced them to nothing more than objects for pleasure. From the surviving speeches of Dios and Lysias, we know each Porny served 6 to 10 men a day, earning only enough for a handful of meager lentils. Meanwhile, brothel owners reaped enormous profits. Part of that money flowed directly into the city's treasury through official taxes. Athenian law at the time set no age limits for prostitution. Archaeological evidence and ancient records show that girls as young as 10 to 13 were forced into these dark rooms. On each thigh, a charred scar from a red-hot iron branded them as living merchandise. Life here was cruel to the core. When a girl dared refuse to work, brutal punishments followed immediately, being whipped in public, starved for 3 days, or worse. On the very first day a new girl entered the brothel, a horrific ritual was carried out before the eyes of all the other women and the regular customers. A man named Poppy from Thessaly recounted that this was done deliberately to break the girl's spirit, to crush all hope inside her. The crowd would cheer as if witnessing a sport, turning one human's agony into entertainment. New girls were valued far higher than those broken in. Some men were willing to pay 10 times the normal rate to be with someone untouched by harm. Writers of the time described it as though it were nothing out of the ordinary, like buying fruit at the market. There was no privacy whatsoever. Women worked in the corners of large rooms, separated only by filthy cloth or torn mats. Every sound of pain became background music for the men waiting their turn. Before continuing with these forgotten stories, where suffering and courage existed side by side, please support the channel so we can tell the stories of those who were never heard while they were alive. The masters divided women into categories of merchandise: women from far-off Nubia, very short women, mute women, female fighters, and those not yet broken. Each type had its own price and its own circle of clients. Paintings from the 5th century show depraved contests, men competing to overpower a resisting woman purely for amusement. Inscriptions on brothel walls reveal that customers would pay extra to inflict severe injuries, to slash faces, leave scars, or permanently damage a woman's body. Here, violence was sold like any other legal commodity. Women meant for punishment were even more expensive. Torn lips, broken teeth, burns from oil lamps, these were features certain perverse customers paid to see. A woman's pain became art in their eyes. Her screams were music for drunken men. In the same city that once birthed great theater and profound thought, the abuse of human beings became the most profitable business of all. And yet, the daily cruelty was nothing compared to what happened during religious festivals. On special occasions, especially during the Dionia festival, women forced into prostitution would be handed over to groups of men entirely for free, as part of a so-called religious offering ritual. Ancient texts describing those days did not shy away from the horrifying truth. When the music began, the wine flowed, and the crowd roared, somewhere in a dark corner, a woman was turned into a toy for collective amusement. Men would jeer, place bets on how long she could endure. On such days, whatever little dignity a woman had left was stripped away. She became the plaything of drunkards, their laughter and wagers drowning out her cries for help. Records from a physician of the time noted that some died from internal injuries, others from suffocation, and others from massive blood loss. Priests even claimed that such deaths pleased the gods. The women's blood mixed with wine on the altar, and their last breath was called a prayer for a bountiful harvest. When the festival ended, those still alive were dragged back to the brothel to continue working if they still had strength. Those who died were taken outside the city walls and thrown into ravines like garbage. But this was only the climax of a system of violence that played out every day. Beatings were routine. Women were struck with wooden rods, leather straps, or bare hands. Their owners even allowed regular clients to punish them, turning the smallest mistake into an excuse for cruelty: spilling wine, calling a client by the wrong name, or simply crying. Punishments could include being locked in a dark room without food or water, tied to a stone pillar in the winter night wearing wet clothes, or left under the scorching summer sun without a drop to drink. They called it correcting behavior. Sometimes women were beaten with wine cups, knife handles, or wooden pestles, each leaving wounds that healed slowly, if at all. Over time, they learned to hide their pain behind false smiles because tears only angered the master more. In a city that worshipped the beauty of the human body, women's bodies here became canvases of wounds and scars. If anyone dared to escape, Athenian law treated it as theft of property, with punishments both public and brutal. A hot iron brand would be burned into the forehead or chest, so the entire city could recognize one who had tried to flee. Court records show some were nailed to wooden boards and displayed in the square as a warning. Many died of thirst or from infections caused by the rusted nails. Some desperate women sought refuge in temples, hoping for divine protection. But priests often accepted a small payment to return them to their owners. The bloodstains on the temple steps would be scrubbed away by other slaves the next morning. Each failed escape attempt brought harsher punishment. Athenian law had 1,000 ways to break a woman's spirit while still preserving her value. Though in truth, when a new woman cost less than a doctor's fee, that value was nothing but an excuse for cruelty. Medical records of the era show that very few survived past the age of 25. Sexually transmitted diseases, infections from repeated injuries, exhaustion, and countless other ailments were the main causes. Women with festering sores, foul odors, and constant bleeding were still forced to work until they collapsed. Treatment was a luxury. A new slave was cheaper than calling a physician. When clients complained about the stench of rotting flesh and blood, the owners would beat the sick as though blows could heal dead tissue. Excavations near old brothels have uncovered the skeletal remains of women with pelvises deformed from violence and forced childbirth, fractured skulls, ribs broken and set wrong, and twisted spines, all silent proof of a systematic machine of abuse. If a woman became too weak to work, she would be taken outside the city walls, whether alive or dead. In Athens, the cradle of ideals about beauty, women's bodies were discarded like shattered pottery. Pregnancy was considered damaging the property and was punished immediately. Forced ingestion of poison, blows to the stomach, or being made to carry heavy loads until collapse. Medical writings describe secret abortions performed with dangerous herbs, boiling oil, or by inserting sharp wooden sticks into the womb. If childbirth could not be avoided, the woman gave birth alone, on the same filthy straw she used to serve clients. No midwife, no medicine, no clean water. Many died from blood loss or infection. Archaeologists have found the bones of newborns in brothel drains and garbage pits, infants killed moments after birth. Killing the newborn was routine. A baby meant extra costs and lost workdays. The mother would take her child's life with her own hands, seeing it as the only form of mercy left. Under Athenian law, these women had no human rights at all. Their bodies belonged entirely to their masters. They worked to pay off fabricated debts for food, clothing, and shelter, debts that never decreased because every day brought new interest and penalties. A woman had no right to refuse any client, even if he injured her severely or forced her into something life-threatening. Her consent or refusal meant nothing under the law. Court records mention women who tried to report abuse, but judges dismissed them. Athenian law did not allow slaves to testify against free citizens unless they were tortured to verify their words. In the society that created democracy, half the population was stripped of all rights, and enslaved women stood at the very bottom, below livestock, which at least was fed adequately. Yet sometimes there were faint glimmers of hope. A few became the favorites of their master or of a wealthy patron. They were given private rooms, jewelry, and silk instead of coarse wool, but always under strict surveillance. These were beautiful cages. They knew their position depended entirely on one man's mood, a man who could, in a single evening, send them back to the squalid brothel or kill them for a single word he didn't like. Ancient records also mention a custom among owners, gifting their favored woman to friends as a gesture of hospitality. She would spend the night with the guest, then return to her master in the morning, like a prized cup briefly loaned out. Even at the height of the slave hierarchy, they were still objects. The only difference was a layer of gold instead of iron chains. But time spared no one. Whether brothel worker or cherished mistress, all met the same final fate, a nameless, forgotten death. Their bodies were not buried according to Greek rites, no tombstones, no inscriptions. Corpses were thrown beyond the city walls, into ravines, or buried hastily in unmarked graves. In stark contrast to the sacred Greek burial customs, they had no offerings, no prayers. Even if granted freedom, their past barred them from rejoining respectable society. Former prostitutes were forbidden from participating in civic life, becoming phantoms with no legal existence. Archaeologists have found women's bones mixed with trash and shards of pottery, the final resting place of those deemed less than human. In a culture that wrote immortal epics about heroes, thousands of women vanished without a trace. Their suffering was too ordinary to become a grand tragedy. The real tragedy was the forgetting. Comic playwrights like Aristophanes turned prostitutes into lewd, ridiculous characters, fit to be mocked and beaten. Audiences roared with laughter at scenes of rape, abuse, and humiliation. Women's pain became public entertainment. On pottery, images of gang rape, torture, and violence were painted to decorate drinking cups and banquet plates. Violence against women became a form of art woven into daily life. Poets praised the beauty of high-class courtesans, but brothel women appeared in verse only as jokes, as figures of scorn. Their cries were turned into pleasing rhymes, their tears into images of rain or morning dew. In a society that transformed tragedy into lofty art, the living tragedies of real people were reduced to comedy. Athens had mastered the art of ignoring the suffering of those deemed unworthy of sympathy, a necessary blindness for an economy built on exploiting the powerless. Prostitution brought steady income to Athens' treasury through brothel taxes and profits from the slave trade. Democracy thrived on the foundation of slavery and the exclusion of women from political life. When Socrates preached about virtue in the Agora, just a few streets away, hundreds of women existed as living merchandise. When Pericles praised the spirit of Athens, the city was making money from human trafficking. The schools of philosophy, the theaters, the magnificent temples, all stood upon an economy sustained by the blood and bodies of nameless women. The marble of the Parthenon, eternal symbol of classical beauty, was paid for with the silent blood shed in the shadows, with cries that no one ever answered. And yet, in modern history books and on the lips of tour guides, that shadowed part of the story almost doesn't exist. The image of tens of thousands of women crushed and discarded vanishes from the official narrative, as if telling their story would tarnish the glory of antiquity. This silence not only erases memory, it prolongs their injustice into the present day. Their quiet ghosts still drift among the ruins of the city, demanding the right to have their story told. Not to beautify Athens, but to tear away the veil that has hidden the truth for centuries. No one remembers their names. No one keeps any relic of theirs. Yet their existence, though erased from our shared memory, is etched into every stone, every surviving shard of pottery. Thank you for watching to the end of this video. If you believe this story deserves to be known, please subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts in the comments. Your voice and support help us continue searching for and telling the buried stories, so the voices of those who were never heard in life can rise once more.